It's Test J, Section 2, Question 6. An undergraduate degree is necessary for appointment to the executive board. Courtney was asking about necessary and sufficient earlier. Necessary means if you don't have it, you can't be on the executive board. By the way, that's common sense English. Air, oxygen, is necessary for life. That means if you don't have air, you're dead. It doesn't mean that if you do have air, you're alive. That would be sufficient. But air is not sufficient for life. Air is necessary for life. Okay, so an undergraduate degree is necessary for appointment to the executive board. If you don't have an undergraduate degree, you can't be on the executive board. If you do have an undergraduate degree, that doesn't automatically put you on the board. It's necessary, not sufficient. Okay. Further, no one with a felony conviction can be appointed to the board. What that premise does is it says that a felony conviction is a sufficient condition to keep you off the board. Another way of saying that is that a felony conviction, lack of a felony conviction, is a necessary condition for being on the board. If you're on the board, you got to have an undergraduate degree. It's necessary. And you can't have a felony conviction. That's necessary. If you do have a felony conviction, then that's sufficient to prove you're not on the board. And if you don't have an undergraduate degree, that would be sufficient to prove that you can't be on the board. All right. So I have two necessary conditions for being on the board. Undergraduate degree, no felony convictions. Thus, Murray, an accountant with both a bachelor's and a master's degree, I don't care about the master's degree, but the bachelor's ticks a box as a necessary condition, cannot be accepted, for the position of executive administrator. Why? Since he has a felony conviction. Okay, felony conviction is definitely enough to keep you off the board. And if you're not reading carefully enough, you might actually think that this argument is already logically proven. I know that Murray, with his felony conviction, cannot be on the board. That's a done deal. But the question says, the argument's conclusion follows logically if which one of the following is assumed. That's a sufficient assumption question stem. And what that means is the argument can't possibly yet be proven. If the argument had already been proven, then they can't ask a sufficient assumption question. A sufficient assumption question is about proving the conclusion of the argument correct. So what is the conclusion of the argument? Well, here it's Murray can't be executive administrator. That's what this person is trying to prove. They gave you a whole bunch of background facts about what it takes to be on the board. They gave you some background facts about Murray, and then they said, therefore, Murray can't be executive administrator. There's one missing piece in this argument, and on a sufficient assumption question, that's always the case. There's one missing piece of the argument, and you have to supply that missing piece that will take the evidence we have and connect it to the conclusion we want. The evidence is, you can't have a felony on the board. Murray has a felony, so therefore Murray definitely can't be on the board. But the conclusion actually says Murray can't be executive administrator. The one thing they did not say is that the executive administrator is on the board. And if that's true, then Murray can't be executive administrator. And that's going to be the answer. The answer here has to say the executive administrator is a member of the board. A, anyone with a master's degree and without a felony conviction is eligible for appointment to the executive board. That has nothing to do with the executive administrator position, which really was the hanging, missing link of this argument was where did an executive administrator come from? That doesn't have, is that the board or is that not the board? If it's not the board, this argument makes no sense. B, only candidates eligible for appointment to the executive board can be accepted for the position of executive administrator. That'll do it. Now, it's not exactly the words that I predicted. I predicted the executive administrator is a member of the board. But B has that same effect. I already know that Murray is disqualified for the board B says, if you're not qualified for the board, then you can't be executive administrator. If B's true, and you combine it with the rest of the evidence on the page, the conclusion of the argument is proven. That's why the answer here is B for this sufficient assumption question. C, an undergraduate degree is not necessary for acceptance for the position of executive administrator. Who cares? Murray has the undergraduate degree. How can that possibly keep Murray off of the board? D, if Murray did not have a felony conviction, he would be accepted for the position of executive administrator. That's nice, but that doesn't keep Murray off the board. We're trying to keep Murray off of executive administrator. How does D keep Murray away from being executive administrator? It doesn't. E, the felony charge on which Murray was convicted is relevant to the duties. I don't care. The facts on the page said nothing about the duties or what's relevant, or it just said, listen, you have to have an undergraduate degree to be on the board and you can't have a felony conviction. Murray has a felony, so Murray can't be on the board. If B is a fact, then Murray also cannot be the executive administrator. It proves the conclusion of the argument, and that's why B is the answer.